Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Dilemmas, a practical approach presented by Jim Bina and Dr. Judy Holcomb. I'm Victoria Schaefer, Senior Membership Manager at HFTP. If you are collecting continuing education credit today, please note that you will need to self-report your credit for this webinar through your HFTP account. Today, we welcome Jim Bina, CHAE, CHTP, Director of Finance at Rosen Hotels and Resorts, and Dr. Judy Holcomb, CHAE, Hospitality Educator and Administrator. Dr. Holcomb is the Chair of the Department of the Sport Business International Hospitality Hotel and Event Management at St. Leo's University School of Business. She also holds the position of Associate Professor of International Hospitality Management. Dr. Holcomb received her PhD in Hospitality Graduate Education from the University of Central Florida's Rosen College of Hospitality Management, Bachelor's of Science in Business Management, and Master's of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management from the University of Central Florida. Judy holds the designation of Certified Hospitality Accounting Executive. Jim Bina joined Rosen Hotels and Resorts in 1996 as the Assistant Controller. In 2002, he was promoted to President of Millennium Technology Group, a subsidiary company of Rosen Hotels and Resorts. In March of 2012, Jim added Rosen Hotels and Resorts Director of Finance to his list of responsibilities. Jim has earned his designations of Certified Hospitality Account Executive and Certified Hospitality Technology Professional. Jim has served as the HFTP chairperson for the 2018 High-Tech Advisory Council and served on the HFTP 2018 Global Nominating Committee. Jim continues to serve on the High-Tech Advisory Council and currently serves on the HFTP Global Board of Directors. Thanks for being with us today, Judy and Jim. I will hand the floor over to you to begin your presentation.
Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to just start by presenting our goals for this session. First, we want to provide situational examples of ethics for us to consider the ethical implications. Second, understanding the different aspects of ethics and the work environment. And third, understanding how to lead by example. According to Oxford, ethics is defined as moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. So here we have our first accounting scenario. After years of successful operations, the management company Bill is working for had some financial setbacks and became cash strapped. The owner called an emergency meeting and determined that in order to keep the company in business, they would have to borrow funds from property operating accounts. If they didn't, the only option was for the company to declare bankruptcy and put all employees out of work. So Trevor's going to launch a poll now, and I'd like for you to answer the questions.
All right, on your screen, you should see the first polling question for today. The question is, would you take the money out of the operating accounts? Please select if you would or would not. We'll reveal results in just about 10 seconds. All right, on your screen, you should see the results. 21% of attendees have selected yes. 20% of the attendees have selected yes, while 80% have selected no.
Okay, so we see this as an ethical dilemma due to the misallocation of funds. This is not an uncommon issue that we've seen stories in the news regarding this as well. So our next scenario, so I want to see if you would change your answer. If you knew that there were over 40 employees in the company, would you change your answer that you gave previously? Trevor?
On your screen, just like the first polling question, you should see the second polling question. Would you change your answer, yes or no? We will reveal results again in about 10 seconds. At this point, the results are pretty clear. 100% of attendees have selected no. Okay, back to you.
Okay, so interesting. So this particular ethics question relates back to, business scenarios, again, like I said, that we have seen in various news articles, et cetera. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jim with regards to the next scenario.
So in scenario number 2, we raised the question, you fly out of town on business and your plane gets delayed. You get a voucher for a $200 travel credit. Do you use it for personal travel or your next business trip? And Trevor, we'll turn this over to you for some questions.
Very good, very good. At this time, you should see the next polling question. Some results are still coming in, but at this time, 76% of attendees would use the credit for the next business trip, whereas 24% would use the credit for the next personal trip. Back to you.
So this is an interesting scenario. I think that there's no right or wrong answer to this particular question. In this scenario, I think it's very important that a company has specific policies that relate to this in their potential travel procedures. I also think and would wonder if someone might change their answer if a company credit card had been used to pay for this business trip versus a personal credit card. If a personal credit card was used, did you get points? Do you get to keep the points? And again, I turn to a situation where this should be driven by company policy. I might see in many scenarios where the employee or associate of the organization feels that they can keep this credit for their personal use because it might be eating into personal time because the trip was delayed. But again, I feel very strongly about making sure that the company has very firm policies and procedures in place regarding this type of scenario. We're going to move on to our next example. It's related to a hotel tip or service charge policy. Your hotel policy states that no cash tips are to be taken by any banquet or catering employee, that they are not put in the gratuity pool. Susan is a hardworking banquet manager. Susan comes to you and tells you that she has received a hefty cash tip from a group, and she knows the policy, but she asks that she be able to keep it and not turn it in. Trevor, we have another question here. Would you require her to turn the tip in or not?
Just like the last few on your screen, please select if you would or would not. All right, with that, at this time, 83% of attendees have selected yes, while 17% have selected no. Back to you.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for answering that question. This is interesting. As I indicated in our previous scenario, I think it's really, really important that there are clear guidelines or policies within the organization and that those guidelines or policies are followed to the letter of the law. In this particular instance, this is an issue related to, could be related to favoritism if you allow one associate to do it and another associate not to keep it. And of course, we would never want to put ourselves in a situation of having to defend why we did one thing or another to our human resource office. Trevor, there's another polling question here. We'd like everybody to answer. If you knew that this particular employee, his 5-year-old was just diagnosed with cancer and she's struggling to pay her bills, would you change your answer? And so, Trevor, can we have everybody answer that question?
Yep, results are coming in, but at this time, they're pretty unanimous. 100% of attendees have selected no, they would not change their answer.
Very good. So again, we come back to the strict policies that our organization would have and not showing favoritism. We might direct this employee to the Human Resource Office to maybe garner further assistance from community banks or volunteer organizations to assist with any struggles this associate might be having. So, and with that, Judy, we'll turn it back over to you for the next part of our presentation.
Thanks, Jim. The idea of morality extends beyond your individual views to include what's right or wrong for the community and society at large. However, when ethical decisions are made, they are influenced by your moral views. Moral code extends beyond individual views. Hence, ethical decisions are influenced by your upbringing, your religion, peer pressure, culture, societal pressures, etc. So I want you to take a minute and think about the first question I've posed here. What characteristics would a person exhibit to indicate that they're living a virtuous life? Now think about yourself. Are you living a virtuous life? I've included a website here that help you determine what are virtues and some examples. Now we talk about virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is the philosophy developed by Aristotle and other ancient Greeks. It is the quest to understand and live a life of moral character. This character-based approach to morality assumes that we acquire virtue through practice. By practicing being honest, brave, just, generous, and so on, a person develops an honorable moral code. So, by honoring virtuous habits, people will likely make the right choice when faced with an ethical challenge. So in the video, they discuss 3 key moral philosophies, one of them being virtue ethics. Virtue ethics not only deals with whether an action is right or wrong, it provides guidance as to the sort of characteristics and behaviors a good person will seek to achieve. It's synonymous with moral character and describes a person, not an action of a person. This theory suggests that the way we build a good society is to help its members to be good people, rather than use laws and punishments to prevent or deter bad actions. So again, I'd like you to take a minute to think about this first question that I've posed here. What does living a life of integrity look like? Do you feel like you live your life with integrity? Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching, C.S. Lewis. So when virtue refers to the person, integrity relates to the acts of a person. Acting with integrity means understanding, accepting, and choosing to live in accordance with one's principles, which could include honesty, fairness, and decency. A person of integrity will consistently demonstrate good character by being free of corruption and hypocrisy. Integrity is revealed when people act virtuously, regardless of the circumstance or consequences. This often requires moral courage. Indeed, integrity is the critical connection between ethics and moral action. So here's a quote by one of my favorite authors. If you haven't read any of her books or seen any of her TED Talks, I highly recommend any of them. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what's right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them. She also goes on to state that integrity can be difficult at times. So bringing all of these concepts together, integrity is the crucial connection between ethics and moral action.
So on this next slide, we wanted to present to you some practical uses for some of the information that Judy and I have presented today. I think we deviated from some of the standard questions we might ask regarding delivering a case of wine to your house from a vendor or that additional television set when your hotel or your organization replaced TVs in guest rooms. And we wanted to try to present some things a bit outside of the box and a bit more theoretical, and now to put some of that stuff to work. So let's talk about hiring for just a second. In many organizations, in some positions, human resources sends an associate to a work position or to a manager and says, here's this employee that's going to work with you today. And we hope that your human resource office has procedures in place for screening people, but in the case of being able to interview potential associates for specific positions, we would want to use hiring practices that promote or look for the ethics or integrity of an individual. And why most positions probably have a standard set of interview questions that you might ask a potential associate, I think it's really important that you try to carry on a conversation with that associate or potential associate. While you might have your standard list of questions, those questions can be posed to the potential associate to tell you a story. That storytelling would potentially bring out to you or indicate to you how that person might react to certain situations, how they handle certain situations, and what their moral or ethical code may be. I think it's important that your company handbook is renewed on a regular or reviewed on a regular basis. In our organization, that handbook is referred to the policy book. It's the place the employee or associate or manager turns to know the rules of how the organization operates. Within that document or within that book, there would be certain requirements for every associate to meet. While outside of that book, your company would have a set of procedures that everyone should follow. Going back to that handbook should have an ethics policy within it. It should have a gift policy within it so that every associate knows what is expected, what is tolerated, or what is allowed within the organization. I think that so many times we turn to that book as the Bible for our particular organization. In our case, for example, I went back to the case of wine or to the television set. Rosen Hotels and Resorts has a very specific policy regarding not accepting gifts. Those gifts, while they might include television sets or cases of wine, would carry over to tickets to theater, plane trips, trips to exotic places. Those types of things are not allowed in our organization. They assist us in not allowing a vendor or a company to influence potentially the way we might feel about signing a contract, cementing a purchase, those types of activities. In addition, we want to take a very close look at social media policies. So many of our organizations are using Twitter, using Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those particular areas where we might see or have opportunity to see our employees or our managers' postings. We want to make sure that the associate is following a good moral, ethical code. We, of course, wouldn't want to see anything that would be posted that might be illegal, unethical, or immoral. I think that we have an obligation. We're obviously not monitoring social media accounts, but we obviously see or come across postings. We would not want our associates to be posting pictures of clients or guests in our hotels or making comments about our particular work areas or circumstances. We want to make sure, as we indicated in one of our additional questions, that we have clear policy regarding accepting cash tips, charge tips, how service charges are distributed, that they're fair and equitable across the operation, and that those policies and procedures are followed on a regular basis. And my last bullet point here indicates train, train, and train. I know that especially in this time, it is so hard to bring people together to reiterate policy, to reiterate procedure, but to also put scenarios in front of your employees or associates to spur conversation, to make sure that everyone across the organization is being treated fairly and equitably, and that each one of your associates is treating guests fairly and equitably. It's a very, very important part of providing superior guest service, both internally and externally. And with that, I would turn it over to Victoria for any questions that the audience might have of Judy or I.
Okay, so you may post a question in the chat if you would like for me to ask on your behalf. But I do have some questions already that have been submitted. One of them is, my boss asked me to cover for an expense report by saying I was at a meal when I wasn't. How should I handle this situation?
I'll take that. So this goes back to difficult conversations. I think we need to be honest with our bosses, with our fellow workers, our employees, about what we feel is right or wrong. I know that's a difficult conversation, and people are concerned about being fired over something like this, but I think it's important that you let your boss know that you don't feel comfortable with this, that is against your moral code, that you know it's against company policy, assuming that there is a policy about this, and have a discussion. Because if he doesn't know your stance, then he doesn't know that it's going against, your moral code. So I think that would be the first step. If he tells you after that, I don't care, I want you to do it, then I guess you have a decision to make on your own. Now, a lot of times people are put in that particular type of situation where your boss tells you to do something that's unethical. A lot of times in hospitality organizations, that's why we have a dual reporting system. Now, if you have someone else to report to in the corporate office at the accounting or finance role, then it's possible to bring that up to, the director of finance or someone at the corporate office level if you have that relationship. So I know this is something that several of us may have been put into a position like this. I know when I was in a particular role, I had a situation where a GM was giving out, advances to employees, which was against the policy. And it was difficult, but I had to go to the corporate office to my director of finance and say, unfortunately, I did bring it to his attention. He kept doing it, the GM, but then I went to the corporate office and said, look, we have a policy on this, and the GM is doing this. Doesn't make you popular, and we all know that things we do as controllers don't make us popular, unfortunately. And in my previous life, it wasn't mentioned, but I did spend 25 years in the hospitality industry, and about 20 of those was in some sort of controller or assistant controller role. So that's the best advice I can give you on that one.
Yeah. So Judy, if I could take this one step further, I might say, as cliche as it might sound, honesty is the best policy. So it starts with yourself in knowing that you have a clear-cut mindset of what's right and wrong. And in this particular instance, the fact of the matter is you weren't there. So it's unfortunate that you are being put in that position, but the right answer is, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I wasn't there. If this is the first time that this is happening between you and this individual, it sets a precedent for the future that that should not occur again. And if it does, you know, we have to examine the relationship that we have between you and this person. And in the instance of, hopefully, there is a human resource person or a second tier of management to go to express the concern that you might have about this particular individual. Thanks, Victoria.
Sure. Okay, so another one has come in. What can our club do to be more proactive in the hiring practice in order to prevent unethical and or illegal behaviors that can take place?
So, Judy, I can take this one if you like, since we talked about hiring a little bit. I think that it is important to make sure that there's an outline of the expected interview questions that every potential candidate has to answer. And as I indicated earlier, for line level positions, sometimes it might seem like the potential associate is just on the firing line. And the series of questions that you might ask are yes or no questions, or short answer questions. If it's a cashier, it might be related to making change or their experience in a certain area. If this is a middle manager or manager director type position, your organization might want to consider using panel interviews. So it's a situation where not only one person is making the decision about hiring this particular associate, and that you're asking probing questions to find out about the individual and the way they handle certain situations, the way they react to certain situations, and for that matter, the way they're reacting to you. If they're able to carry on a conversation and be conversational, and you get information from them, I would say it's probably a person that we want to consider for the particular role. If their answers are short, if their answers are maybe not directly answering a question, when they consider whether the employee is the potential employee is the right fit or not.
I'd like to add to that, Jim, also posing ethical dilemmas in the interview process. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, seeing how they react, seeing what their answers are.
Okay, so and I'm sorry, Judy, did you have something more to add?
No, I was going to say back to you, Victoria.
Oh, okay. So we have another one. How do you handle addressing something unethical or immoral you found out after the fact? This is for an organization without HR or handbooks.
That's a difficult one because it's very difficult to run an organization without a handbook because the handbook is a backbone to, you know, the HR policies, and to be able to not be able to go back to the handbook and say, look, we have a policy on this. You know, I would say that even if you don't have a handbook, doesn't mean you can't write a policy. If everybody is on the same page and they're clear about what is right and what is wrong, what you're able to do and what you're not able to do in an organization, you're much better off. So even just writing a policy would put you in a better position, even if it's after the fact. Jim?
So, you know, I think in your own moral code, without the handbook or without a specific policy related to something, you might consider the 3 strikes and you're out rule personally. Because it's after the fact, again, a difficult situation may need to take place with that particular associate. If you find that you are in the leadership role, then you have to take it upon yourself to question the circumstance that created the after the fact, and then set precedent to that particular associate that behavior can't be tolerated, and that if it happens again, what the consequence is. Hopefully, you're in a particular position where you have the authority or the ability to set that consequence. And then obviously, monitoring has to take place. And in any circumstances, that whatever you set forth for that particular associate holds true to the rest of the organization. I think that's so important to save ourselves from any legal trouble or issues, is that everyone is treated the same way.
So the person who posed this question also added more information. They knew they didn't want an HR handbook because they would have to be held to a higher standard for their actions they knew were wrong. It was for the head of the org in addressing his associates. Any advice?
Jim?
This is a tough one because I think that we probably need to encourage the head of the organization to take on some specific policies or procedures that protect you from getting yourself into these moral or unethical situations. I think as we are seeking employment, it is very important for us to seek employment with organizations that we think match our moral code or our ethical habits. And in that situation, if a company doesn't have a policy or a standard, we examine whether we want to work with that organization, and that there are certain tolerances we may have to accept depending on the head of that organization and their actions.
I agree, Jim. I think that as controllers, IT directors, department heads, there may be times when we're presented with a situation that does not, come in line with our moral code. And if this happens to occur time after time, then that's when you have to ask yourself, is this the company for me? Is this going to be aligned with my moral code, my ethics? And does this make sense? Can I live with this? Can I live with these decisions that are being made or these acts that are taking place that are against what I believe in? And that is something that only you can answer. And if you answer no to that, then unfortunately, it's probably time to move on.
So, Judy, I might take this one step further, and I think it's probably really important to take into consideration in the context of this question, we can assume this is at the executive level. And I think it's very important to take into consideration the fact that while you have applied for a job or you've heard about a potential opening and you are being interviewed by a potential employer, you are also interviewing the employer. And it's up to you to make a determination about whether you think you're going to fit into that organization as well as they're thinking that you're going to fit into that organization. So it's a double-edged sword. We have as much obligation to research the employer and what their history is, what the word on the street might be about that organization, as well as are they looking to us to see if we fit. And so it's important to look at both sides.
I agree. And I think too many people don't see the hiring process as a two-way street. Right. It should be a process that helps the employer decide whether they want to hire the employee and the employee decide whether they want to work for that company. And I mean, it's not like you can ask ethical questions of the employer, but like Jim said, you can do research. You can ask questions of people that possibly are currently working for the company itself.
Well, and I would take that one step further, Judy, to say that, you can, during the interview process, you can ask if, depending on where you are in that process, you can ask to see the company handbook. You'd like to be able to review it. You'll find out through the interview process about benefits, about eligibility for certain things, when you can take advantage of vacation, leave, those types of things. And that policy or that handbook should give you an indication of what the company atmosphere might be like. And if that doesn't exist, again, we're going to question whether it's the right fit or the right organization for us. And again, I believe that if you are using honesty as the best policy at whatever level of management you are in the organization, I hope that you have the ability to be able to go to someone to talk to them about issues, and that there are potential multiple layers of people that you can reach out to. That's a matter of forming good relationships within the organization and forming trust between multiple layers of management.
I agree. And as managers, we should always stand up for what we believe in. And I know it's not always easy. And, as we go back to Brene Brown, having integrity is not always easy. It's not always fun. But there are times when we do have to have a conversation and state that we don't agree with what's happening.
Agreed. Thanks, Judy.
So we are at the end of our webinar, and I'd like to give Dr. Holcomb and Jim a chance for any final thoughts before we close out.
I'd like to thank everybody for attending. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm a member, so I'm in the directory. This presentation will be posted. I wanted to share it with some of your colleagues who didn't get a chance to attend today. It'll be posted here in a couple of days. So thank you.
Yeah, what Judy said. Everybody, we do really appreciate your time, and we hope that you found our presentation useful, and we'll catch you at the next one. Thanks, Victoria.
Okay, before we close, just a quick reminder that next week's webinar topic addresses legal consideration and risks from working from home to reopening businesses with attorneys at Goldberg Segalla. Registration is open now, and we hope you can attend. Thank you all for participating today. This concludes today's broadcast. See you next week. Bye-bye.